Now that we've looked at the bodily view of personal identity, and we've also looked at one major issue with the bodily view of personal identity, what I'm going to do in this video is have a look at the psychological view of personal identity. One that some suggest is a little bit more convincing and doesn't fall into the same traps that the bodily view does. As a lesson plan, what we're going to do is we're going to recap the bodily view and also the brain transplants argument against it. We're going to outline the psychological view of personal identity, and we're going to explain the psychological view and why one should really be convinced by it. And then we're also going to ask ourselves the question, what psychological relation might our persistence consist in? So we're going to have a look at sort of different issues within the psychological view itself about really what allows us to persist from a point A to point B in time if we're going to accept the psychological view. We're also going to have a look a little bit at the start at another problem with the bodily view, just to really hit home really the issues that the bodily view has. So as a recap, so far we've looked at the bodily view of personal identity. This view basically states that what makes you is your body. However, some have rejected to this for a number of reasons. One of those reasons is the brain transplants argument, and really, is there another way we can understand personal identity? And is there another way to really work out and discover who we are? So we can look at another objection to the bodily view of personal identity, which is the issue of teleportation. So let's look at the idea of teleportation from Star Trek. Okay, so a person in this fictional universe, in this fictional idea, a person is dematerialized in one location and then rematerialized in another. How this works is that when you step into the teleport, the machine scans every single atom in your body, every single aspect of your physical being, and then you are destroyed. The machine then uses this scan that you have that is in the machine, okay, to duplicate your body exactly the same in a secondary location. And then thus you have been teleported to that secondary location. But in reality, what's happened is your first self has been destroyed and a different you has been created in a different location. Now, this means there is no bodily continuity. You are completely destroyed. Your body, at least, is completely destroyed. How can we describe this and explain this, but also accept the bodily view of personal identity? The answer is you can't. There's not really any way you can do that. There's no real possible way to accept this is physically possible, and to also accept the view of bodily personal identity. Now, some have rejected this view that it is actually impossible to do. You cannot physically do this. However, it's what we would suggest is it's definitely logically possible. It makes logical sense that we can do this, and the idea of it being physically possible is something that could conceivably be achieved in the future with future technology. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. So if we can accept that this is a possibility that could happen, then we still have to answer and ask ourselves the questions about the implications about personal identity that this brings up. You could explain how a person persists and how there is continuity if we look at the psychological view. So the psychological view is really one explanation for who we are and how we persist. And it's really the view that a human person consists of their continuation in psychological life. This is effectively the definition of the psychological view. It gets around the brain transplant argument since it allows for one's body to be destroyed and for you to personally still exist. So what you are is your brain, your psychology, everything that makes up your psychology. The view also means that if your psychological life ends, your brain, your psychology, your memories, your experiences, all that seems to end, then your personality ceases to exist. Your personhood is removed at that point. And this is true even if your body persists. Okay, and this gets us quite neatly round the brain transplants argument. The psychological view is supported by a lot of people for a number of different reasons. So for one, it doesn't fall into the same kind of traps that the bodily view does. So the idea of teleportation and the issue of the brain transplants argument can be explained away if we reject the bodily view and we accept the psychological view. It also seems to make more intuitive sense than the bodily view. The bodily view is the most simple definition and explanation for how we can explain personal identity, but the psychological view is a little bit more intuitively convincing. It appears to be the case that we are our brains and our thoughts and our experiences, etc. These are all parts of our person. These are what make me me. But there are still some questions we have to ask. For one, what psychological relation might our persistence consist in? We've looked at the idea of personal identity, but what about the persistence of a person from point A to point B in time? How can we explain our persistence using the psychological view of personal identity? Well, one answer is that what we can have is that our persistence could consist in our memory. So a past or a future being might be you if and only if you can now remember an experience in your past. So memories could be the thing that really link these the idea of persistence together. The idea that something existing at time t1 and something existing at time t2, they are identical, they are connected, there's continuity there because of the memories that they have. They have the same memory. However, this view does have some problems. I don't remember everything from the past, and that doesn't mean that a past me wasn't me. That there's still a continuity break here, because you don't have to remember everything. And really, what does it mean to, like, if we're going to suggest that memory is what allows for our personal identity to persist through time, then what memories? Because not every single memory is kept, and not every single, and basically the point being that there is a break in continuity if you just forget something. So it doesn't seem to be very convincing. A more convincing argument, which adds a little bit more elegance and complexity, could be the notion of causal dependence. So a being is psychologically connected with you as you are now, just if she is in the same psychological state. Okay, so we'll talk about both of these in the next lesson. As a sort of a lesson task, are there any reasons why you might want to prefer the idea of a causal dependence rather than memory for psychological persistence? So the idea of you having the same psychology, it being a collective thing rather than it just being about memories. Research this question and try to come up with your own arguments, and try and work out really what we could be talking about in the next lesson. The next lesson is the final in this course, and we're going to really attack the psychological view by looking at the long life problem.